Well, good morning, everyone. Just going to wait a couple of minutes, or probably about a minute, before we get going, just to give everyone a chance to get on. Right then, I think that'll do it. We've got up to 76 people so far. That's great. Yeah, so good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining. It's great we've got so many people on today. Today, we're going to look at how e-invoicing is becoming more important in the world today and its predicted impact on organisations over the coming years. My name is Nigel Pollock, and I'm one of the IBSS account managers, and I'll be setting the scene for today's session. Just to let you know, the webinar will be available on demand after we finish, so you can share with your colleagues. If you have any questions as we go through, please put them in the chat and we'll answer them in the Q&A section. We're also running a couple of polls during the presentation, and it would be fantastic if you could all give your input, and we'll share those results at the end. As a slight aside to today's webinar, I'd just like to take the opportunity to remind you all to register for one of our roadshows if you can. We're running these in March at 4 venues across the UK and Ireland. We'd love to see you all in person and to tell you about all the exciting developments coming this year. We're in the midst of a global invoicing trend, seeing government mandates across the world. These are designed to tackle fraud and tax avoidance through e-invoicing via public networks such as Peppol and DBN Alliance, as well as a number of private networks. At the same time, AI-driven intelligence document processing and invoice automation is gaining real traction. With workflows supporting business rules of validation, verification and enrichment, platforms like inSTREAM streamlines AP complexities, increases accuracy, and automates the mundane and repetitive tasks associated with invoice processing. With us today are industry experts who will share their knowledge and experience of e-invoicing both nationally and globally. To start with, Joe will be explaining what e-invoicing is and how the term has been used over the past couple of decades. Followed by Dolf, who's been helping organisations around the world tackle e-invoicing since 2014. Dolf will expand on how invoicing works, tell us about progress around the globe with e-invoicing, and share lessons learned by other countries which are embracing e-invoicing. Rachel will then tell us and give us an update on the pending e-invoice consultation process due to be published next month. Finally, Olivia will explain where inSTREAM fits into the whole e-invoicing story and how it can help support you as e-invoicing becomes more mainstream. We'll be joined by Josh Collins, our inSTREAM product manager in the closing Q&As. So now I'd like to hand you over to Jo. She's going to look at the history of e-invoicing over the years. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. It's fabulous to see so many of you here today. Thanks for your time and your interest. I'm Jo Hunter, and I'm the Head of Business Development for inSTREAM. inSTREAM is the AI-driven invoice automation module that is now available to Integra users. So to set the scene today for this e-invoicing webinar, I think it's interesting to briefly look at the story so far and the evolving definition of e-invoicing. So to start with, I'd like to invite those of you who'd like to share your thoughts to type in the chat your own definition of e-invoicing. I think it would be interesting to look back on, and we will share the results of that chat. So we'll take a few moments to do that now. Of course, as e-invoicing itself has evolved over several decades, its definition has too. And if you'd have asked an audience for its definition way back in 1988, for instance, it was very much in its infancy, and it was centred mainly around EDI. And that went on for a number of years. But today it's far more advanced. It refers to the electronic creation, exchange and processing of invoices. And we also have government mandates too for e-invoicing around the world. We have official standards internationally too, and there are digital platforms that automate processing, and tax authorities are also involved for compliance reporting, to improve sales tax compliance, reduce fraud and increase transparency. And today e-invoicing is mainly cloud-based and interoperable across countries and platforms. Next slide, please. Some describe intelligent document processing as e-invoicing, and it is quite rightly part of the picture, but it specifically, IDP refers to the combining of technologies such as OCR and the many AI technologies we have in our toolkits these days, and it's driven by business rules, workflow and machine learning. IDP enhances the current e-invoicing movement by automating the extraction and validation of invoice data, as well as processing and the management of accounts payable documents. All of this contributes to the wider goals of e-invoicing, reducing manual effort and improving compliance. Next slide, please. I'm going to power through this e-invoicing timeline for you because it's quite interesting to look at where we've been and where we've come from and where we are today. So at the bottom left of this slide, you'll see in the mid-60s, we saw the early EDI emerge for the exchange of shipping manifests electronically. This began to happen across continents. By 1974, we had early OCR, and we had a subsidiary of General Electric, GXS, launch one of the very first EDI services for invoices and other important documents. GXS later became OpenText, which some of you might have heard of. They were one of the early van partners, or private networks, if you like, for e-invoicing, providing a secure and standardised platform. OpenText was key in establishing the foundation for the modern e-invoicing ecosystem that we see today. A decade after EDI was established, though, paper still very much dominated the invoicing world. And surprisingly, whilst doing my research for this presentation, I found a report, quite a recent report from Basware, that suggests 58% of organisations today still rely on paper-based systems of some description. The 1980s was a key decade because of its software popularisation for business. The accounting world saw the first enterprise software emerge with financials for SAP, Oracle, and a wide range of technologies. Integra came soon after in 1993, but also in the 80s, we saw an explosion of PC-based off-the-shelf desktop packages for SMEs. We saw Sage, QuickBooks, Lotus 123, WordPerfect. Microsoft launched Word in 1983 and Excel in 1985, and suddenly people were generating invoices electronically. Furthermore, back in the 80s, the fax machine was revolutionising the office world for exchanging documents as images between offices, countries and continents. Email adoption too happened in the 80s, and invoices began to fly across the ether. The 1980s really was a key decade for establishing the foundations of e-invoicing today. In 2004, the year that inSTREAM was launched, intelligent document processing, powered by AI, started to take hold. Early systems were clunky and reliant very much on cumbersome templates. But today we have solutions like inSTREAM, where humans in the loop teach our machines so that they can be templateless and far more flexible and quick to adapt. My colleague Olivia will tell you more about inSTREAM a little later. In that same year, 2004, incidentally, Mexico, pioneers of e-invoicing, set global standards for real-time tax compliance. The following year, in 2005, we saw SAFTI, Standard Audit File for Tax, and Denmark mandated e-invoicing for all public sector transactions. In 2008, Peppol was born and CTC reporting began. CTC stands for Continuous Transaction Controls. 2014, we saw the NHS Shared Business Services joint venture with Sopra. They'd partnered with Tradeshift to provide a free web portal that allowed suppliers to the NHS to electronically submit invoices and credit notes. The next decade witnessed more governments around the world issuing mandates. And in 2019, the UK government said that public sector organisations must be capable of receiving and processing e-invoices. In 2020, it was mandated that suppliers to the NHS must submit e-invoices using the Peppol network. And in 2022, we saw VIDA, a proposal from the European Commission for VAT in a digital age, and one of its 3 pillars is e-invoicing. Last year in 2024, the DBN Alliance, another major public e-invoicing network, was launched operationally. And Dolf Kars, our speaker today, is the chair of this non-profit organisation, and he'll tell you more a little more shortly. Last year, our government announced plans for an e-invoicing consultation to explore wider adoption. Our speaker from HMRC, Rachel Stirrat, will tell you what's happening there and what next steps are. So that really was a bit of a whistle-stop tour of the story so far, and there is a blog available if you want to download it, and we will send it around afterwards as well. And we've also factored in Q&A at the end with all panelists, so if you have any questions on any of that, you'll get an opportunity to answer. So I'd just like to run a poll now at the end of my piece, because I did find these statistics about paper quite startling, and it'd be interesting to know what percentage of your incoming invoice flow actually still arrives on paper. So if you'd like to share that with us, we will share the results with you all afterwards. I think it'd be quite interesting. I'll just give you a few moments to do that before I hand you over to Dolf. I think the results may come up on screen. That's interesting. Thanks, guys. Thank you. Very, very informative. I'm going to hand over to Dolf now, who is going to talk to you about e-invoicing and the future, lessons learned from other countries.
Yes, thank you so much, Joe, for this introduction. And as you can hear, I'm not a native English speaker, but I'm a Dutch native. And but I am in the UK at the moment. I'm on Gatwick Airport for a meeting I will have later today. So nice to meet you all. I'm speaking here in the role of my chair of the DBNA network, Digital Business Network Alliance, which is the open exchange network for North America. And since 2014, I'm working on a service provider, an e-invoicing service provider called Storecove. And at this moment, I'm CCO of the company and of course founder from the days in the past. Okay, so thank you. Someone else is helping me to switch through the slides, so that works fantastic. So what you see here is the big wave, and this is the big wave of the mandates coming. And why this is relevant is, as what we see happening throughout the world regarding e-invoicing adoption and adoption of the open exchange networks is mostly driven by mandates. So that means that countries where tax authorities and governments in those countries set rules for companies that they have to connect to the tax authority or they connect to B2B open exchange network, those mandates really bring that adoption of e-invoicing becomes relevant. And what you see here as a logo, the VIDA guideline, which Joe already talked about, is a European guideline which tries to harmonize countries that introduce the reporting to the tax authority. And reporting to the tax authority, as Joe said, is called CTC reporting, continuous transaction control. So what is trying to be harmonized here is that companies that introduce reporting will all use the same format, preferably will report via the Peppol network, which isn't the case in many countries yet. And you can't, as a tax authority, stop the flow. So the business logic should stay in place. And why this is relevant is before, like countries like Italy and Poland, and preparing was France, had a model where you had to send to the tax authority and the tax authority would send the invoice for you. And this is a model that's not permitted according to the VIDA guidelines. And well, I think Italy has time until 2035. It's the only country that has this long period, and all other countries have to adhere to the guidelines at 2030, that is. Next slide, please. Thank you. So what you see here to the left is the two factors actually pushing adoption, driving adoption of these open exchange networks. On the one hand, B2B mandates. Example of that upcoming is Belgium. 1st of January 26, Belgium will come with a B2B mandate, where all companies within Belgium have to connect to the Peppol network. So that means everyone needs to transact, send invoices and so forth via this open exchange network. So that's what brings full adoption in Belgium, which is new, and not a lot of countries have introduced it like this. And the other thing driving adoption is CTC reporting, meaning that, as we discussed, you need to report to the tax authority. And an example of that is Malaysia, who introduced this last year. And when the tax authority introduces CTC reporting, mostly that's done in 3 steps: large companies, medium-sized companies, and then after 12 months, the smaller companies. And there's also a lot of postponing there. So also Malaysia postponed for 6 months. And so it's within 3 days that the real mandate will start for the first tranche, the largest companies in Malaysia. So 1st of February, this mandate will really be executed. Below, you see the business logic of efficiency, speed, and safety driving adoption. And that's important, especially for countries that don't have a mandate, like, for instance, the US. In North America, there's an open exchange network, which only last quarter of last year got really interoperable, but there's no mandate. So the big question is, what is driving e-invoicing in that country? Well, mainly because there were all sorts of standards around e-invoices, all sorts of scattered networks. And of course, that was not really a practical way to go forward. So all these small networks are now actually being replaced slowly by this large open exchange network called DBNA. And the other network you see here is Peppol. This is the network, like Joe explained, that started in 2008, if I'm correct, and which is now being used in Europe and Asia. So in Asia, Japan, Malaysia, Singapore, Australia, New Zealand already joined that network, and there are rumors that South Korea and China might join in the future. Next slide, please. Thank you. So we work together closely with IBSS and of course with inSTREAM, delivering technology behind the solution. And so there I can explain what makes this solution so special. That is that the solution converts to one data format called JSON. So that means that no matter which type of e-invoice comes in, so that could be CII format, that could be a JP PIN from Japan, that could be Exrechnung from Germany or Fattura PA from Italy, it's always converted to the same JSON data. So you can read every incoming e-invoice and it will end up as a booking proposal in inSTREAM. And of course, within inSTREAM, you have all the functionality that that system brings. So you can see the flow that comes in via both Peppol and the DBNA network as a new flow besides what you are already receiving. And so it's just a new channel. And the interesting thing on the receiving side is that you can only register in one software solution. So you can only have one endpoint for your e-invoice flow. And for you, this will be inSTREAM. And so that's relevant to know because if you would like to switch to another system, that would mean you have to deactivate in one system and reactivate your identifier, and mostly an identifier is a VAT number or a DUNS number or a GLN number, but that identifier is unique for your company. And if you would like to switch from another system to, for instance, inSTREAM, then you need to deactivate with the other system and reactivate in inSTREAM. The next slide, please. Here you see an example of a four-corner model. So this is the example of an exchange network. It looks really simple, and it is really simple because you can compare this to a telephone network. You see the service providers. One is the sending access point, and the other is the receiving access point. What you do is you connect your financial system to a service provider, and they will make sure that the invoice is delivered or is received. Dynamic lookup is the main thing about open exchange networks, meaning that if you send an invoice, you can ask the network, is this identifier, this VAT number, is it present on the network? And then the network can answer, yes, it's with me. The answer comes from the receiving service provider. Could mean that that will be in Singapore, and that same service provider, you can ask what format do they need? And then you can produce the specific format that endpoint that customer needs. And so that's the logic of these open exchange networks. You don't have to be in contact with the counterpart to become interoperable, because just like with a telephone network, you sign up once, everyone can reach you. And the other way around, as a sender, you can send to everyone once you're validated on the network. And the validation is also something that inSTREAM takes care of for you. Next slide, please. Here you see the DBNA network, not a lot of difference. So also a four-corner model, and the four-corner model proved itself in the telecom world, as a telephone network is also a four-corner model. But with a telephone network, you don't notice that globally there are maybe 30 or 40 networks that you're connected to. And this is the same for e-invoicing in the future. You only connect once and you're connected to several networks. This example is DBNA. DBNA has two special things compared to Peppol. It's fully B2B driven. So actually that's everything that's decided on in the US is decided on by the board of the DBNA with all the work groups that it has, but specifically for North American needs. And the other special thing about this network is that it doesn't have authorities like Peppol Authority, NHS in UK, and BOSA in Belgium. So where the authorities, the Peppol Authority, sets the rules in formats and identifiers. Now here it's the board deciding on the rules and identifiers and the formats. So DBNA also specifically made the network available for every country in the world. So that means that every company, no matter where they're situated, can sign up to the DBNA network with their global, commonly used, local, commonly used identifier. So that brings that there's quite some possibility for expansion of the DBNA network. Next slide, please. Here you see some dates on mandates, and mandates get postponed. So these are the dates that we're familiar with now. And you see Malaysia starting in a few days. Singapore, we have a certification in March for all service providers, and then in May, e-Invoicing called C5. Reporting to the tax authority will start, and they will start with a new format called SG PINT. PIN stands for Peppol International. France will start in June. France erected a Peppol authority, and they will come with PDPs. PDPs are certified service providers in France that are allowed to report to the tax authority. And Poland, again, got postponed because they didn't adhere to the VIDA guidelines. And what we know now is this period that they will start with their reporting to the tax authority. But there's no mandate for Peppol yet in Poland. So the introduction of CTC reporting is about to come, but no Peppol as transport mechanism yet. Next slide, please. Here are some examples of only B2B mandates. Discussed Belgium and Germany came with a mandate where companies need to be able to receive e-invoices. So that could mean Peppol, could also be Edifact, but it could also be Zugpferd in hybrid format via email. So that's a light mandate. It's not really a full B2B mandate, but we experience that a lot of companies get nervous in Germany and just want to be ready, both on the sending and the receiving side. So also in Germany, the expectation is that Peppol will be properly introduced soon. They have their own authority called COSIT, their own Peppol authority, and probably, but that's my prediction, in all European countries, this CTC reporting will be introduced one moment in time. But there's no obligation, but of course, a tax authority, if they know that all invoices are on the data packages, is interested to receive that data and to collect it. Next slide, please. This specifically for Ireland. So Ireland does have its own Peppol authority, Office of Government and Procurement. You have an identifier being the VAT number. So this is a regularly used international identifier, which is great. Format being the BIS V3, which is the standard Peppol format at this moment, and not yet involved in the VIDA pilot, but these are ongoing discussions. So it could be that, like you see in the last line, that they will join and get interested to use to join the pilot. Joining the pilot would mean that you will start testing reporting to the tax authority, but via the Peppol network. So if that will be introduced, you understand that the service providers that are allowed to report to a tax authority in another country have to get certified by the tax authority first, but no regulation around that. It's just a pilot. Next slide, please. VIDA compliance, as I said, at 2030, all tax authorities need to adhere to the European guidelines. So if they want to start with reporting, they need to adhere to one format, preferably transport via the Peppol network, and no clearance. So that means not like in Italy that you can stop the business flow. The business logic should stay in place. And to explain that, in Italy, when the tax authority sends your invoice, you send it to the tax authority and they send it for you, that's a single point of failure. So that's technically a risky model to apply. Next slide, if any. Nope, that's it for me. So thank you very much. And if you have questions, please ask at the end of the session.
Hi, and thank you so much for inviting me to this fascinating session. I am Rachel Stirrat. I work in HMRC, where I lead our engagement on e-invoicing. As the Chancellor announced at Budget 2025, we will be consulting on ways to increase the uptake of electronic invoicing and how to ensure that the UK will benefit from this technology. This consultation is due to launch next month and has been a joint project between HMRC and the Department for Business and Trade. This reflects the government's interest in ensuring that e-invoicing delivers productivity benefits to businesses through digitisation, as well as supporting tax compliance and anti-fraud efforts. The two departments will continue to work together as we analyse the responses and develop future government policy. This consultation is very much the start of the policy-making process. At this point, no one has made decisions on what the future UK regime for e-invoicing will look like. So the consultation will look at the case for creating a standard UK approach to e-invoicing. I think we've already heard a bit about the role that standardisation can play in encouraging use of e-invoicing. It will explore different models of e-invoicing. There are a lot of different models in use across the world. And it will also request views on options for some form of e-invoicing mandate, including different scopes that any such mandate could take, as well as looking at options for continuous transaction reporting to HMRC to aid tax compliance. This type of consultation really early on in the policy making process is a great opportunity for us to get views from taxpayers, software providers, tax advisors across the entire UK economy, so that we can best understand the opportunities and challenges that developing this policy presents and ensure that we develop a regime that supports both businesses and tax compliance. Every response will be read by my team and by our colleagues in DBT, and we will be using these responses to go on to provide advice to ministers on next steps in this project as we look to ensure that the UK reaps the benefits of this technology. I very much hope that you will participate in the consultation once it's published. Please also do feel free to share it with your networks. It's really important to us to get views from across the economy to ensure that we develop policy that works for everyone, for as many people as possible. And I really look forward to seeing how people respond and hearing reviews on how we can best support uptake of e-invoicing across the UK. So thank you.
Feel free to use that. It's very
Thank you, Rachel. That was very insightful. I've had the pleasure of meeting some of you already, but for those that do not know me, I am Olivia O'Connor, the account manager for inSTREAM, Integra's new invoice processing module. So progressing on to the next slide, I'm going to talk to you about inSTREAM and how does it work. So inSTREAM is an intelligent document processing software trusted by organisations all around the world, including Capgemini and DHL supply chain customers, Currys PLC, Coroni Tumlar, and most recently the public sector with integration into Centros. With over 20 years experience in processing automation, we've developed inSTREAM to streamline operations and increase efficiency for our customers. So over those 20 years, we've combined a variety of evolving technologies to automate your invoice processing from end to end. During this presentation, we'll take a closer look at how inSTREAM works and the benefits it delivers. So progressing on to the next slide, here is our inSTREAM infographic that gives you a high-level overview of your invoices journey. To note, inSTREAM is a fully managed service, so most of what you see is in the background. So starting on the left-hand side of the diagram, inSTREAM is able to receive all invoices regardless of how they are sent, so including post, email, SFTP, API, or from e-invoicing platforms. All invoices you receive follow a single process, so inSTREAM, and documents received via e-invoicing platforms go straight through inSTREAM without the need of human intervention, except for exceptions handling where you can query or terminate the invoice. So a question I have for you all is, what percentage of your invoices are received through the e-invoicing platform Peppol? A poll will appear on the screen and I'll give you some time to fill it in. It will be great to know how many of you are already receiving invoices via this network. I've spoken to some of you already who I know who are, and it'll be interesting to see how this percentage changes over time. So thank you for that. So back to the infographic. So after we receive the document, inSTREAM prepares the document in the background. So this can be by splitting off attachments and converting the document to a PDF, which is a machine readable format. inSTREAM then understands what this document is, so an invoice, and then inSTREAM uses KDE Copilot to instantly extract key data such as supplier information, PO numbers, invoice numbers, the monetary values, dates, and more without requiring prior training. If KDE Copilot requires assistance, our team of experts is ready to step in and provide guidance. The next step is validate, verify, and enrich. So inSTREAM doesn't just extract, but offers configurable validation rules to suit your business needs. So this includes, but not limited to, verification of supply details, date and currency conversion, other compliance checks, including duplication checks, date validation, and ensuring that the totals add up. Where there are exceptions, these are routed to your team with a full audit trail. You can choose to either query or reject an invoice with a rejection reason and a nominated recipient. Approved invoices are passed into Centros with seamless integration. We then have Insights that looks over this process, which is a standard suite of reports and dashboards to give you an overview of your invoices journey through inSTREAM and key statistics on straight-through processing per supplier, which I'll delve deeper into. So progressing on to the next slide, I'll talk a bit about the key features and benefits of inSTREAM. So one being that inSTREAM is a supervised machine learning tool. Therefore, it removes the need for upfront templating and forever changing formats of new suppliers. Creating templates can be timely, so we reduce that manual effort involved to do so. We already have customers integrated with Centros and work really closely with the team. inSTREAM is constantly evolving without the need of an upgrade. We are an established e-invoicing provider, so we're able to receive your invoices via these networks whenever you're ready. inSTREAM takes away the manual effort from processing invoices and is run as a fully managed service. As mentioned before, inSTREAM does not just extract the data, but validates it to ensure no invalid data is submitted to your Centros finance system, or we can enforce a no PO, no pay rules for certain suppliers. And we have an interactive dashboard for your team and your assigned account manager to review. So progressing on to the next slide, I have a screenshot of one of our dashboards. So this is a straight-through processing dashboard, and it will provide you with daily statistics detailing where your documents are in the process, and we can see summaries of which suppliers and business entities the documents belong to and know where they sit in the workflow. So we can see this example customer is achieving a 77 straight-through processing rate, And if we go to the next slide, you'll be able to determine which suppliers and documents are excelling through the system and look at potential issues. Next slide, please. So here you can see a breakdown per supplier. So it's color coded, so we can start to see like your high volume suppliers and make sure their straight through processing rate is high as possible. And if you go to the next slide, we can start to see some of the failure reasons of why it's not gone straight through. So looking at IT supply syndicate, we can see some of the failure reasons are the net plus the VAT minus the discount does not equal the gross. So that's why his failed straight through processing. We can also see the PO number is not on the PO list. So we can see how automation is progressing from supply compliance point of view and how they're reliant or they are providing the PO number when required. So this is a good overview that you have, and you'll be assigned an account manager that'll be able to look at this, and also your team will have access as well. So progressing on to the next slide, that is my, I have some more key features and benefits as well. So we have the increased efficiency, inSTREAM is faster set up and effective, the dashboards and reports to provide visibility to the whole process, the lower operational costs by automating the process. It's a fully managed service, so your team do not have to handle that manual effort, and we have that business rule validation as well. So if we go to my next slide, that's all my slides. So I'd like to say thank you for your time. If you'd like to discuss inSTREAM in more detail, do not hesitate to contact me, as my email is on the screen. I'll now hand back over to Nigel to organise some of the questions that you all have.
Lovely, thanks Olivia, and thanks to all our presenters. It's really interesting. We have a few questions that have come in. Still time to get some more in. Let me just read this out. Okay, let's find them. Does the solution, it's just disappeared again. Does the solution automate returning an email invoice back to the sender if the validation checks aren't met?
Yeah, so I can tell
oh, gosh, yeah.
Yeah, so so we can automate emails back to the sender if validation don't check aren't met. That can either go to the sender themselves or could go to someone in your team. That's highly configurable.
Okay. Does inSTREAM convert Peppol invoices?
So do you mean to PDF?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Josh.
so again, I can take that one as well. So yeah, so with the Peppol integration, suppliers can get documents into the Peppol network, and they can put attachments to that. So if we have attachments presented to us, we can present them back to the user. If we don't, we have a mechanism where we can render that data back to a PDF format, so we can present that to the user in inSTREAM, and also present that back to your finance system as well.
Okay, lovely. Might have one for Andy Rankin. Is Andy Rankin around? Say hello if you are.
Hi, I'm here. Hi.
And this is one that might be of some interest to NHS customers. How does the solution work with NHS VAT rules?
That's an excellent question.
I knew it'd come up.
We did. So the system by default will be told from Integra. So Integra and Centros will pass this information to inSTREAM, and you can change it over time as things change. Default VAT codes to use for different rates. So you have lower, exempt, etc. However, we also in Integra allow you to store the VAT codes to be used for VATable items and non-VATable items depending on the supplier. So what will often happen, since we don't really understand or see on the invoice the reclaim rates they're going to use, the VAT treatment you want to use within the NHS codes, then you'll effectively say this supplier's data is an N1 type or an N2 type, etc. And you'll have that mapping which you store and maintain in Integra. It passes it to inSTREAM. So maybe the first invoice that comes through, you'll need to validate and check that, and it will come up and tell you it needs that. Any of your subsequent invoices, it will be able to reuse the same information. Or if you have a supplier where that changed a lot, it will have to ask your local experts in the AP team what to use in particular instances. But basically, we have a rule table that we can embed. We do embed within Centros.
Okay, lovely. Thanks, Andy. That's as I say, if we arrange conversations with you guys who want to talk about it, we'll go into a bit more detail and a bit specific to how you want the system to work for you. Okay, I've got an interesting one here. What's the average monthly volume of invoices per entity going through inSTREAM? Or just generally, I guess. How many invoices do you think you process a month?
Oh, that's a difficult one. The numbers off the top of my head I haven't got at the moment. Josh, have you got any thoughts on that?
I can't give you the average, but I have recently been working on billing. So I can tell you for December, it looks like we've got 600,000 that have gone through that month from billing from that point. That may fluctuate up or down depending on different months.
Oh, that's a good number. Yeah, thank you. Thanks,
Yeah.
Josh. Got another one. How long is a typical implementation of inSTREAM? How long does it take? I know it's a bit of how long's a piece of string, but
yeah,
guide, I guess.
I'll take that one as well then. So a typical implementation can take about 12 weeks, but that can come down if it's simpler, can go up maybe if it's more complex. But that does include stuff like requirements gathering, implementation, any training that's needed, systems integration testing, so SITs, user acceptance testing, so UAT, and hypercare period at the end during go live as well. We have had a recent kind of success with an IBSS implementation taking 8 weeks from start to finish.
Okay, that's cool. Thank you. Here's one that Dolf might be able to help us with. I think it's probably aimed at joining a network as sort of an access provider, and it's how do suppliers sign up? Is there a cost to supplier? How many current suppliers are on board? I guess it's probably focused on, I guess, UK and Ireland in that respect.
Yeah, so specific details for UK and Ireland I do not have, but I know for the full Peppol network, it's 600,000 registrations, and those are registrations on the receiving side. So that's just one end. So that's also the side, of course, that's inSTREAM is on. Registering on the Peppol network, you do with your own identifiers. So that could be a VAT number that you already own or a DUNS number that you already own, and you do this via inSTREAM. When you register, you get validated. So service providers need to prove that the company that signs up to the network is who it says that it is. And once active on the network, you actually implicitly say to the whole network, I want to receive as many e-invoices as possible. So implicitly, you tell all your suppliers, I'm on the network, please send me as much as you can. And large companies connect their ERP system to the network via mostly a service provider and an API. And smaller companies and medium-sized companies can use their accountancy software. So it's important that if you select a financial solution like accountancy software, that also there you make sure that they support e-invoicing and support Peppol. So that's a sort of pre-qualifier that we hear in the market that companies look for.
Okay, thanks, Dolf. Here's one. This is probably one that's we'll cover in the road shows. But if Andy's on, this one might be able to let us know. We're about to implement IDM. What are the plans for IDM in the longer term? Will you be developing IDM in the future, or will this be de-supported? I think it's probably the question is how does IDM work or not work with inSTREAM?
Okay, so we have no plans to de-support IDM at the moment, which is Integra's own inbuilt scanning solution. So the way I sort of visualize it is IDM might be for a smaller set of data processed locally by AP staff on site, whereas obviously Stirrat on an inSTREAM is a managed service processing it for you. I think the biggest differentiator is actually things like Peppol, etc., coming along, where you're effectively using the Stirrat team to handle all the various styles of invoices and inputs that are coming along, doing that legwork and tidying it up, and then passing it back into the AP function to deal with the real issues, which is the matching, the approvals, the variances, good procurement cycles. So it allows you to focus on that end of the process rather than getting the information in. So I think there's IDM's got its own little life and its own little place in the world, but it's not necessarily going to be your Peppol solution going forward.
Thanks, Andy. What are the stages within the validation process to manage dodgy invoices? Well, dodgy invoices means whether it's fraudulent or just poorly presented. I guess it's talking about how that process from the invoice being received at inSTREAM, how that's managed, and if there's things that are potentially wrong with it.
Okay, so I'll try that. So the various kind of fraud protection methods that we can employ, I won't go into all of them, but there's certain things like we can make sure that the invoices can only be assigned to suppliers that you give us. So we can have an integrated supply list with your systems. So only ones that you say are valid suppliers are ones that we can receive and purchase documents for. We can do some basic fraud checks as well to make sure that the net plus VAT equals gross, and other kind of math steps that go in there. But there's lots of things we can do. inSTREAM is highly configurable, so if there's something else that we need, we can always put that in as well.
Okay, thanks, Josh. And probably the last one we've got time for. Can inSTREAM deal with contractor and subcontractor invoices to apply the correct CIS rules and accounting?
Sure. So I saw that one come in, so I had a quick look to see what CIS is. It's not one that I'm familiar with, but again, inSTREAM is always evolving, so that this could be an additional feature we put in here. But we do have customers where we have contractors are the suppliers, essentially, so we can deal with that scenario.
Just to add a little bit to that. So as part of the recognition, it can identify the split between materials and labour. The rules on which type of certificate you're using will purely be held within Centros. It will be completely in control of that, but the data it can get will include whether it's a materials or labour split. So the capture's right, and but the processing, your controls of how you're dealing with it still need to be something that the AP team need to keep control of.
All right, lovely. Thanks, Annie. That's about all we've got time for the questions. We do have if we haven't got to your one, we've got your name, so we'll get a response off straight away after this. That's great. Thanks guys for that. So thank you for that. I guess in summary, from all today's presenters, it certainly looks like e-invoicing is becoming more and more important. The governments are seeing it as a way to manage and collect taxation and also to tackle fraud and tax avoidance. The UK government's obviously recognised this, and Rachel telling us about the start of that consultation process sort of shows that their intentions are to go down this route. It'd be great if you get a chance to be able to contribute to that consultation process. We've talked about how the e-invoicing has been around as a term for a good while, and the technology has been there to support e-invoicing. But I think the introduction of AI is now really helping to deliver more and more benefits across the whole process. With both Centros and inSTREAM, you can see that we're ready and able to support your organisation at whatever pace you want to go or need to go on the invoicing journey. So if you want to discuss anything that we've talked about today, or you want more information about anything to this, then get in touch with your account manager. They'll be more than happy to help. finally, well, thank you all for joining today. It's been a really good turnout, and hopefully we'll see some of you, or a lot of you, at our roadshows in March. Thank you and goodbye.